everyone, and welcome back to another podcast brought to you by Green Mortgage and Protection. It's been quite a while since the last one, but we are back, and this time we are talking all things surveys for property purchases, for remortgages, whether it be residential and buy-to-let. So we've got our local expert with us today, which is Oliver Hudson. Welcome, Oliver.
Thanks, James.
Have you been on a podcast before?
No, I don't think I have.
We get quite a lot of newbies when we do this, so that trend's continuing. So for those of you that, obviously I know you quite well, for those of you that don't know who you are, give us a brief overview of kind of like you, your background and things like that.
Okay, so I'm now a residential surveyor, and that's all I do is surveys for buyers, well, for various people, but normally buyers. My background is I had an estate agency in Hull and then in Hessel. I used to run a law firm in Hull for about 17, 18 years. And while doing that, set up an estate agency doing sales, valuations, lettings, management, that sort of thing. So that gave me a good sort of foundation and background in estate agency and in property generally, residential property. And then I, like many people, I sort of ended up sort of falling into surveying. I was approached by the RICS who wanted me to become accredited with them as an estate agent, which was a strange thing. But I ended up going down that route, and then a local surveyor, Graham Gibbs, very sort of well-known surveyor, he sort of supported me and guided me, and I learned surveying through him.
How long ago was that?
So that was about sort of 2017 when I eventually got RICS accredited as an associate member of the RICS. And shadowed him for a long time, practiced surveys, and just learnt how to survey a property and how to sort of investigate and assess and diagnose defects and that sort of thing, which takes years. And now for a while I was a consultant surveyor for him alongside as an estate agent, but in the end I decided I really wanted to focus on surveying. Yeah. So that's all I do now.
Because you'd have seen kind of all aspects of it, so from a seller's point of view and a buyer's point of view as an agent, also as the actual surveyor where your job is to highlight defects, but then also on the legal side of it as well. So you've kind of had a foot in all camps and see it from all angles now.
I have, which is really unusual, I suppose. You won't find many surveyors, I suppose, who've been an estate agent and who've been actively involved in a big conveyancing department. So I have seen it from sort of all ways. The only bit I've not been involved in is your side, which is, although we did used to do mortgages, at the law firm years ago, including a lot of endowment mortgages, unfortunately. So that's one side I've not been involved in, but certainly in the conveyancing side, the selling side, and now the surveying side. So I can sort of see it from all angles, which is really helpful when you're advising clients. Yeah.
So there are three main types of survey, aren't there? So if you can just give us a quick run through of what the three main types are.
Yeah, so some people get confused because there's a mortgage survey, which to me is a mortgage valuation rather than a survey. It's not really a survey, and sometimes people get confused between a valuation and a survey, but they're both done by a surveyor, which is confusing. So the mortgage valuation that people normally have to pay for as part of their mortgage application is not a survey of the condition of the property. And it really, even though, you tell me if I'm right, but I think generally the buyer pays for the valuation. But in my experience, it really is there to protect the lender rather than the buyer. And depending on the size of the property, a mortgage valuation might take the surveyor anything from sort of 10 minutes to 30 minutes. Really, the lender needs to know, first of all, is the property roughly worth what they're paying for it? And second of all, is the property falling down? Other than that, we're good to go. So from a buyer's point of view, if you do have a mortgage valuation, which you will have if you're buying a property, sometimes they're done remotely online, sometimes it's a physical inspection. But it's not a condition inspection. So it's a mistake to think that will bring up any potential issues with the building. So that's a mortgage valuation. Then we have home surveys. We have home survey level 2, home survey level 3. The level 3 is also similar to a level 3 full building survey. Most properties only need a level 2 survey, and it is a survey. It's an inspection of the whole property from house or bungalow or flat, to the roof, to the grounds, to the boundaries, garages, permanent outbuildings, anything like that. So we look at everything, the drains, the meters, the electrics, the heating, the plumbing, and so on. So you'll get that with a home survey level 2. Sometimes it's appropriate to have a home survey level 3 if it's a complex building, or if it's really old, or if it's been extended lots of times. So it just depends on the property.
Yeah, because we tell our buyers is exactly what you said, is the mortgage valuation, that protects the lender, because if they're going to give you X amount of thousands of pounds, they want to make sure, if worst case scenario, they have to repossess the property and they sell it, that's coming back. And yeah, you're not buying something that's going to be falling down in the next 5 years.
Absolutely.
So why would a survey matter to a buyer? Obviously, the mortgage valuation, that protects the lender. Why would a survey matter to a buyer?
It's so important, and I know I would say that, but genuinely, it's so important. When I bought my last property, the last 2 properties, we had a survey done. Even though I was working as a surveyor when I bought the last one, I didn't do it. It's not appropriate. We viewed it twice, maybe 3 times, but you cannot pick up on defects from viewings. Doesn't matter how good you are. Yeah, you might see the odd thing by chance, but viewings are not sufficient. You need a survey done. It takes hours to become intimately acquainted with the building, and sometimes, I did a big survey the other day on a property in North Lincolnshire, a very old property that's had 3 extensions. It was 8 hours non-stop because there was just so much to look at and see, including outbuildings.
Yeah.
Whereas another one might take you 3 or 4 hours. But you need that time to become intimately acquainted with the building. Without a survey, you just don't really know what's going on in the building, and particularly where properties have been adapted, extended, converted, and so on.
Because I know from experience, like mortgage valuations, they can highlight potential defects, but only if it's glaringly obvious. Like if a valuer walks into a property and you can see black mould all up the wall, or it's bubbling and there's a real strong smell of damp, but some damp issues can be underground, it might not be as obvious, or you do get, unfortunately, some vendors that are quite crafty and they'll do what it takes to hide it for someone to buy it, and then the real issues come to light after that, don't they?
That's absolutely right, and because of the limited amount of time that a valuer will spend at the property, a valuation surveyor will spend at the property, often because, depending on who they work for, sometimes they're under pressure to do like 8 or 10 valuations a day. It's crazy. So they've only got limited time, and they might sometimes pick up on issues. I was dealing with a client the other day who'd had a mortgage valuation, and they had picked up that a couple of chimney breasts had been removed. So they sometimes pick up issues or potential issues, but there's not nearly enough time to. You need an inspection of every part of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from seeing certain pictures from your social media where you're up in the crawl space in the loft and you've got your ladder and you're checking in the gutters on the roof and stuff. So it really is a thorough job, isn't it?
It is. It has to be, and it's getting harder to inspect roofs because we're now all filling our roofs with thermal insulation, which is good. It is making it really harder because if that's been laid across the joists, we can't just go marching across because you end up crushing the insulation. So more and more now as surveyors, we're encouraging people to get a joiner to sort of build a walkway in the roof space, not just for inspections, but for actually repairs and maintenance, because you need to be able to get to all the little spaces to see if you've got leaks, damp, woodworm, anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's a good tip for a buyer. Have a walkway put up on the roof so that just if you're going to be there for 10, 20 years, repairs will be needed. And
instead of just blindly chucking insulation everywhere.
Well, that's right, exactly. Yeah.
So normally, when you go and do level 2 surveys, we've had the property valued by the lender, so we know the value, but the buyer wants to get their own peace of mind. They instruct you for a level 2. What sort of things are you normally looking out for?
Looking for, it's still a very, very thorough survey. But the report, which won't be as thorough as a level 3 report, but it's still, the inspection is incredibly thorough. So I'm looking at the condition of the roof, the age of the roof, and the chimney stacks, any potential defects, looking at all the rainwater goods. One of the one of the things I do is I use my survey reports to try and teach people how to maintain their properties so that they can progress in life as a homeowner looking after their buildings. You know, and one of the classics is rainwater goods. The number of times the gutters and downpipes are full of moss and leaves and general debris, which ends up causing penetrating damp into the roof and the walls. You know, it causes all sorts of issues and blocked gullies at the bottom of downpipes. And understandably, people don't realise how important these simple things are, but rainwater goods cause so many problems and damp.
Yeah.
And all they need is regular clearing and cleaning. And so those are simple things. Looking at the condition of the walls. And obviously, if you've got a very old house, which is solid brick, we're looking at very different things to a modern house with cavity walls. But we're looking at every sort of element of the building. We're looking at the drains. What condition are the drains in? The electrics, have they been updated recently? Do they look in good order? On a level 2, we don't test the electrics, we don't test the heating, we don't test the drains, and we don't test things generally. But on a level 3, we do test everything. But a level 2 is fine because just looking and assessing can give you a pretty good idea of what condition things are in.
Yeah, you can instantly tell by looking at a boiler or a fuse box how old they are.
Absolutely.
Yes, I mean, what I take from what you're saying is a lot of issues come from top and bottom. So it could be like structural movement from underneath, but then obviously like roof issues as well, because rain's going to come down, water's going to come down, movement's going to go upwards. So they're predominantly the two main areas that you would focus on first. And then everything
top
in between.
And bottom. And water is the enemy.
Yeah.
Water is always the enemy. So has the property been built, or is it being maintained in such a way that all water is being managed correctly and removed away from the building? You know, from the roof down to the ground and under the ground.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, that's a huge thing because water is one of the main causes of issues, both in terms of damp, but also structure as well. You know, if you've got a leaking drain, you know, if we've got a sort of diagonal crack, you know, sort of on the ground floor towards the corner, you know, more often than not, if it's not a tree root, then it might well be sort of subsidence caused by a leaking drain just through poor maintenance or some alteration that's been carried out and a foundation's been damaged. You know, but again, it's, you know, that water is what then softens the ground underneath the property and causes that sort of problem. So water is sort of enemy number one that we have to sort of look at.
And I'm guessing some things are more obvious at certain times of the year than others. So, for example, summer, less rain, so you might not highlight, if you're viewing that is, you might not highlight damp issues or water coming in or anything like that, or a smell in the air, whereas in winter, where predominantly more rainfall, those things might be a little bit more obvious to buyers, but regardless, you'll be able to spot them anyway, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. In the heat of summer, sometimes it is difficult to see the kind of sort of water issues that you might see in the winter. But there are a few clues, you know. So, for example, if you're going to view a property and look up, you know, look at the gutters, look at the downpipes. If they're sparkling clean, that's a really good sign. But even in the summer, if they're generally not being looked after, you will see sort of generally green staining on the underside of the gutter and down the downpipe. What that tells you is that they're frequently being blocked and overflowing.
Yeah.
That tends to result in penetrating damp in the walls, and often the rainwater then falls onto the ground, bounces onto the brickwork, so you can end up with rising damp in the lower walls.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of good clue for buyers. Look at the condition of the gutters and are they being well looked after, maintained? It's quite a good clue, really.
Because I think as well, they're probably, as a homeowner, they're the jobs that you forget about.
Absolutely.
So if you're that in tune to do those things, chances are you've probably looked after the rest of that property as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I think it's a good indicator. But equally, it's unfair if you see stained gutters to then think, oh well, they're obviously, you know, not looked after the property at all, because we're all human, we're busy, we forget, or we probably don't really understand how important they are. Yeah.
Because I think if you're listing a property, the first things you think of are probably put a lick of paint on the walls, we'll hide some nasties, but the things that can cause the major issues, which would be highlighted on a survey, are the things that you can't see, like the electric, like the central heating, because obviously they're under the floorboard, what's happening in the roof, what's happening under the floor, which again puts the emphasis on why you need a survey.
That's right. And although there's a lot of things you can't see, there are always clues for us. And I was reading something recently about building surveys and house surveys. And when we did, let's say I go to a house and spend sort of 5 hours doing a survey, my brain, I probably make somewhere from 30 to 40,000 observations during that time. Some of them conscious, many of them unconscious. You're sort of absorbing information at a rapid rate. And sometimes, honestly, the number of times I'm in the shower 2 days later, and I'll suddenly think, that's why. And as a surveyor, you've got to follow the trail, and you see all these clues. Sometimes you see them and you register them. Sometimes you don't consciously register them, but they're in there. And that's why it's very important that surveyors don't rush out their reports after they've done a survey. You need time to reflect. And when you train as a surveyor, that's sort of drilled into you that you need that reflection time, because your subconscious is working with your conscious. And it often, a couple of days later, you'll suddenly put two and two together and realize you followed the trail with all the evidence that you've sort of come into your brain. It's a crazy sort of job in that way, but it really works.
And I can imagine that's probably the biggest battle you have on your hands, because if someone's buying what could be their dream house, they want to know the outcome of this report. So, like, can you get it back to me as soon as possible?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I can fling something at you, but it's not going to be as thorough as I would like it to be and what you would like.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can just give me the time, I'm going to give you everything that you need.
That's right, and that is worthwhile. That is worthwhile, and sometimes you'll be under pressure. Sometimes the estate agents, the sellers, will all be putting you under pressure. But these are really big decisions, and we don't spend any more money than we do on a property, do we? Most of us,
yeah.
So it's really important to have that time. So, but if I've gone and done a survey, I'll generally have a chat with my client the next day or the same day, just to give them a sort of quick overall summary, any major concerns and so on. But I always say, look, I've got a lot of reflecting to do. There might be things that I don't mention now that I do mention in the report, because it takes time sometimes for things to bubble through.
So, I mean, we get our clients sending us these reports, and it's like you say, we are here to help with everything, and it's like, yeah, by all means, we'll take a look, and then it lands in your inbox, and it's like 65 pages, and you're like, I need to find time to read through all this. But when that report comes through, it can be quite scary for people, because they're colour-coded, aren't they? So as soon as somebody sees red, it's like, oh, danger. But like you were saying, a quick fix can be just clearing the gutters. So the gutters might be red because they're bubbling over.
Absolutely. If the gutters and downpipes are full of moss and debris and leaves and they're stained, then that to me would be, a red is a number 3, right? So that would be a number 2.
Yeah.
It needs doing, but it's not urgent. But if I'm then in the front bedroom and I've got damp on the wall above the window, and I know, that's coming from the gate, then that's a level 3.
Yeah.
So that then becomes red, because there is an immediate issue that needs sorting quickly, because, once you've got damp in the walls, you're affecting timbers and all sorts. So, but I wouldn't always, so it might not be a red, it might be an amber level 2, unless there's an immediate defect that needs sorting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes you do get level 3s, but it doesn't mean walk away. It doesn't mean run away from the job. It just means there's an immediate repair needed. So for example, using that example, if there's water overflowing the gutters and causing damp in the bedroom wall, that's not the end of the world, but it needs sorting quickly, because otherwise that wall's deteriorating, timbers are getting wet, and so on, and it's spoiling the decoration. So that needs sorting quickly. So it's a level 3, it's a red, because it needs attention straight away.
Yeah.
But once you've cleared those gutters and sorted the problem, that wall will then dry out. Now, I have to sort of add a proviso there that if that's been in that condition for 2 years, then we could have an issue with rot and decay.
Yeah.
That's different. But if it's just sort of poor maintenance and it's a bit wet, but it doesn't look like it's been there forever, that's fine.
Yeah.
Sort the problem, it'll dry out, go back to normal. So you don't have to be put off by these things.
One of the most common ones we see, which kind of alarms some buyers, especially first-time buyers, is when there's the highlight of lack of electricity and gas safety certificates.
Yeah.
Does that come through as a 2 or as a 3?
That's a really good question, right? And so when I go to sort of surveyor conferences where we get constant updates and trending on all the, whatever's going on in the surveying property world, the advice is that if you haven't seen a certificate, right? Because I survey a lot of properties that are empty, So if I haven't seen a certificate, then I'm supposed to put level 3, high risk, which I personally don't agree with.
I suppose it's a health and safety thing, isn't it? Rather than it being a defect to the property, it's a health and safety
It's
thing.
a health and safety thing generally, exactly. I mean, there are other reasons, obviously, to have your electrics upgraded, but primarily the issue is health and safety. So if you've not seen a certificate, we're supposed to put level 3 red.
Yeah.
To me, I personally don't agree with that. That's not how I tend to operate, because if I inspect the electrics and I can see that it's a modern fuse board, there are modern miniature circuit breakers with twin residual current device protection, I know that risk of electric shock is low, everything looks in good order, but I've not seen a certificate.
Yeah.
For me, it's completely misleading to call that a level 3.
Yeah.
So, but there are many, many surveyors out there who will disagree with me. That's just my view.
Yeah.
But I would always say to the buyer, you must instruct your solicitor to request a valid certificate carried out, within the last 5 years, or, on a rental 10 years on a home-owned property, or if there've been alterations sooner than that. But you want a certificate, and if there isn't one, you should ask that the vendors provide one before exchange of contracts. So I do want that certificate because you need it in place in case, because of the bits that you mentioned earlier that you can't see behind the scenes. But I just think it's misleading.
Yeah, that's the most common
interesting
question we get asked from our buyers is they send us this, oh my God, it's got a red on it, and you look at it, and I fully understand the point is, yes, it's a health and safety risk, but it's also a very quick win. It's very easily fixed. Like a gas safety certificate costs, I don't know, 60 to 100
Absolutely.
pound. It can be done in an hour. Same with an electric safety, that might cost you a little bit more, but again, it's an hour's job. I remember when we sold our house a few years ago, we had a log burner, and they wanted that servicing and sweeping. I was like, that's a really ridiculous request, but I kind of get it, where you're going to set fire to something, you want to make sure that the fumes are going to go the right way.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we'll get one done. But it was like £45. And you just think, why was I getting all that worked up to spend £45 to give them peace of mind?
Yeah, and it's tricky because as a surveyor acting for a buyer, you're trying to do the best for them. So please get the chimney swept. Please give me a HETAS certificate to show that the stove's been serviced.
Yeah.
Right. But there are lots of things like this, right? So some sellers, and obviously I've done this as an estate agent acting for the seller. So, and the seller says, well, what do I do? What do I advise? They're asking for me for this, and this. And from a seller's point of view, if I was the estate agent, I would say, look, end of the day, you haven't got a HETAS certificate for your stove. That is really a regulation. You should have one. But if you've got an open fireplace, do you have to have it swept? Well, an owner should have it swept regularly. But if you haven't had it swept and you're not using it, then I would say to the buyer, look, we're not going to do that. If you want to use that as an open fire, then get it swept when you move in. So there's give and take here. And obviously as a surveyor and as a buyer's solicitor, you're protecting the buyer and you want them to have everything nicely lined up. But it's not always possible to achieve that because there's got to be compromise.
Yeah, because I'm guessing you as the surveyor and the solicitor are kind of in the same boat. Is if you're instructed by somebody, it's your job to highlight every potential issue so that me as the buyer knows exactly what I'm getting myself into. I know what the restrictions are going to be. I know what the possible defects are going to be. So if I then moved in and there was something missing off your report or there was something missing off the searches or something, then there's a course of action there, isn't there? So you do have to be thorough.
I have to be thorough, but I think there's a line that shouldn't be crossed, and I hear about a lot of surveyors and survey reports that are just arse covering exercises and tick boxing, and it just drives me mad. The way Graham taught me, was, as a surveyor, never sit on the fence. You're there to do a job for your client, which is to sort of say there's a problem or there isn't a problem. Don't sit on the fence and just cover yourself. There are sometimes, we have to sort of put in limitations to the survey, like I couldn't see this bit or I couldn't see that bit. That's fine. But it shouldn't be about covering yourself. It should be about giving the best advice. And there's nothing worse than a survey report where the surveyor just flags up every possible potential issue, because that's just of no use whatsoever to the buyer.
Yeah.
And that is the difference between, in my view, a good survey report and a useless survey report. And there are both out there.
Yeah, because ultimately, yes, you want to give the advice, but you also don't want to scare the living daylights out of somebody either, as well. Because a lot of our clients are first-time buyers, so they do look at that and they think, "Oh my God, like what am I buying?" And it's like, if we quickly run through it, is a gas safety certificate. You can have that on the day. They literally fill it out as they go around, rip off a copy. There you go. That's problem done. So for like first-time buyers, if you're viewing a property and you're unsure whether to get a survey or not, what would be like some quick advice you would say to them? Look out for these things. If you see these, you probably need a survey.
Okay, but personally, I wouldn't look at it that way because, and again, you could say, well, you would say that, but genuinely, if I was buying a house today, knowing all that I know about properties, I would have a survey done. Whether that house was built yesterday, 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, because you just don't know. I surveyed a new build in Driffield a couple of months ago, and there were all sorts of issues. It was a brand new property, beautiful looking property, but there were a number of issues. the drains were full of rubble for a start. Now, you wouldn't know that unless somebody went in on your behalf to inspect the drains. There are weep cavity wall construction. You have what's called, you'll see in modern walls, you'll see these little sort of orange, they're called weep holes in the brickwork, particularly above the windows, for example. And those are really important for ventilating and draining the water out of the cavities, all full of mortar, and it's a silly little thing, but they're there because building regulations require them to be there to do a specific job.
That's crazy to think that you go to that level of detail because you've got this enormous house.
Absolutely.
You're looking at this little thing that's
tiny
the
little
size
square.
Of a straw.
Tiny, it's size of a straw. It's tiny, but at least half of them were full of mortar. So that specific piece of equipment cannot function.
Yeah.
And it's silly, but if you're buying a new property, you want it right. So my advice, first of all, is always get a survey. And most of the time you're listening to a level 2 survey. And I know it's expensive. They are expensive because they take a long time to inspect and they take a long time to report on. And we're taking the responsibility and liability for that property's condition on our shoulders from an PI insurance point of view.
Just hearing you mention about looking at those like weep holes is, I could save myself the money to do the survey, but then I've got to go around and check all of these things, which I'm not that sort of person. I'm not that detail orientated, nor would I want to be.
But also,
I would happily pay somebody like yourself to do that.
But also, that's one thing out of thousands that you look at on a survey.
Yeah,
and you can't do that on viewings. So get a survey. But you're generally, what I would also say is surveying is not rocket science, right? It's observation, right? And as Graham always taught me, just write down what you see. What do you see? Write it down. We're all intelligent people. We're all sort of intuitive. We've all got good common sense. So if you're viewing a property as a first-time buyer or anybody, you will know, right, when you walk around the outside of the house or when you walk around the inside, you'll have a sort of immediate impression, a gut feel. Does it sort of feel okay? Do things look okay? Do things look a bit sus? Look in the understairs cupboard and look at the electrics, or, do things sort of feel all right? If you get sort of, there's something not quite right here, you'll be right.
Yeah.
You get a feel from looking at things, and that you'd have to be a surveyor to do that. And there's nothing worse than a house I go in and it's just DIY everywhere. it's been botched and somebody's laid a laminate floor and sort of put beading around the edges of the floor and it's sort of just been badly done. You just get a DIY feel in a house. That for me is always, a red flag.
Yeah, I think we have a number of like buy-to-let properties, and like those sort of properties you're looking to buy, you are normally buying them off previous landlords.
Yeah,
and you walk in, it's a little bit drafty. It's like, well, there's clearly a gap somewhere with that needs investigating. There's the smell of must in the air, so it's like, well, there's potential damp issue. One of the biggest ones I kind of like laugh about is when you go in and everything's textured wallpaper and it's been painted over. It's like, that tells me there's a damp issue. They've papered over it and painted it,
and they've probably sealed it.
Yeah, or there's mismatching textured wallpaper. So that wall's got one, that wall's got another. It's like one of these walls had a recent issue that has now been kind of covered over. But yeah, like you say, you kind of get that gut feel, don't you, when you walk in and you think, yeah, this needs to be looked at further.
Yeah, and of course, if we use equipment, so for example, on a level 2 survey, we will still use equipment to check the moisture in all the walls at low level, and if necessary at high level. So even if you can't see damp, then we're looking for it, and if there is an issue, then we'll pick it up with equipment.
And with that, there's no arguing that. There's a clear reading from a piece of machinery, which I've seen the reports. You then take a photo of it, don't you? So
we do. Although you've got to be very careful with this equipment because the readings can be really, really misleading. So there might be a wall that's absolutely fine, really old brickwork with lots of salts in the brickwork, but it's doing its job and it's not soaking wet, but it might give you a really, really high reading. So again, you get different surveyors, different levels of experience, I suppose, but they have to be used with caution, but they are very, very useful.
Yeah. Because when a report comes back, and there might be some things on there that are red and amber, that's not the end of the world, is it? This is probably where you'd be the best person to answer because you've been on both sides of this.
Yeah.
Is if something does come back for the buyer, what are their like usual courses of action?
So I think most things in a survey report are really just for buyers to know and be aware of. Okay, now, if a buyer has had an offer accepted on a property and then the survey report comes back in, which is the order it normally happens in, isn't it? Survey report comes back in and there are a load of issues. Generally, the thing is not to sort of go back to the estate agent and say, well, I've got this report and it's full of all this stuff, and I want a massive price reduction, because you're just going to annoy the estate agent, you're going to annoy the seller, and often it's not necessary. So for me, I don't see a survey report as a tool for renegotiation, although I'm sure some buyers do.
Yeah.
But that is not how I see it. For me, primarily, it's about understanding the condition of the property, what maintenance and repairs might be needed. End of the day, you're not buying a brand new perfect thing. You're buying, a property that's probably been lived in many times. So there are always going to be repair maintenance issues. So it's primarily a guide to those and how you're going to need to look after the property in the years to come. But if you're buying a property and the survey report brings up something that you really did not anticipate and that you would reasonably not expect to be the case, right? Then absolutely, I'd get a quotation for the works to have it repaired or sorted out, and then I'd probably go back to the estate agent and say, right, okay, this house has been completely renovated, it's in beautiful condition, all looks perfect. So we kind of thought everything would be in good order. Turns out that the roof, when it was re-roofed, it wasn't done quite properly. There's been rainwater getting in. We've got a couple of soaking wet timbers with some wet rot in the loft. There's quite a significant repair there. It's going to cost £5,000. Wasn't expecting that. I do expect the seller to chop that off, Yeah. So that for me would be a classic case of, the surveyor saving the client money, but also being fair and reasonable about it. Or, if a house has been fully modernised and it looks in great order and it turns out actually the electrics weren't done and they're really outdated. And again, you might say, yeah, well, I wasn't expecting that. Because to be fair to me, I don't know anything about electrics and, but why wasn't that done? And, and I haven't got the money to buy the house and do it up. That's why I was buying a house that's been done up. So...
I suppose there's a little bit on the buyer there in the first place, isn't there? So if you're walking around and the boiler looks old, is you can't then turn around and say, "Oh, I was really surprised that the boiler's 20 years old and not very efficient." It's like, well, yeah, those sort of things you should have seen. Maybe structural movement, things in the loft, things that you can't normally see. Yeah, fair enough. But if it's those, like we were talking about earlier, the minor adjustments like safety certificates, maybe just clearing the gutters, those sort of things, we would probably say to our buyers, yeah, realistically, you could maybe ask for that because it's not a massive outlay money-wise. It's a fairly easy fix for them. But yeah, to charge in and say, I want 5,000 off for this is remembering there's somebody else at the other side of this as well, because they might not be aware of it either.
No, that often they're not. Often they're not. I mean, I was doing a survey on a bungalow in Ticton recently, and this old lady was living there, poor woman, and I went up into the loft and I always inspect inside. Most people have combi boilers now, but a lot of people still have water tanks in the loft. Well, I mean, this big fat rat was lying there dead in the hot water tank, and it's the water that she showers in. And bless her, she didn't know. Why would she know that? Why would she be going in the loft?
Yeah.
So, absolutely. There were things, that's only a silly example, and it's easily rectified, although probably took a while to sort of come around from that one. But, there were some things you can't see and are unexpected. And so I think maybe it's kind of like a reasonableness test, as in what, and to be honest, we employed that as an estate agent acting for sellers. We would sometimes say to the sellers, actually, you know what, that's fair enough. But sometimes we'd just say, absolutely not. They're taking the mickey here. Don't give in on that one.
Yeah. I suppose you may or may not kind of like answer this one, but do you ever see things like when you're surveying to think the seller's clearly made an effort to hide this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it never works.
Yeah. It
never works. Yeah. I had a huge mirror up against the wall recently, as if it was just a nice way of dressing the room.
Yeah.
Huge damp patch behind it. Now, depending on the level of survey, level 2, we're not really supposed to sort of move things around. But if there is we have to follow the trail as part of our sort of training and requirements. So if there are clues, then I do need to try and look and see what's going on. So, but absolutely, boxes stacked up.
Yeah.
So to me, you just get used to seeing things. You think, doesn't seem quite right.
Yeah.
And it makes you look.
I think the biggest thing I took away from what you just recently said was these houses could be 100 years old. They have been lived in. Is you can't expect them to be perfect the day you buy it. And especially if you want to put your own stamp on it as well, it's very, very rare that you buy a house in its current condition and change nothing. You might want to put an extension on, as a big example. Lower end, you might even want to paint a room. It's not going to be as you see it when you have it. But it's the same kind of goes for if you was to buy, I don't know, a 20-year-old car. It's not going to have all the original parts. No. It's not going to run like it did when it left the showroom. Is kind of having that as a mindset when you go around.
Absolutely, that's right. That's absolutely right. And going back to your point earlier about, especially for sort of inexperienced buyers, like first-time buyers, when you get a survey report, it is scary. Because it's just this long report full of defects. And so I always say to clients, first of all, survey reports are never going to read well on any property because all we're doing is listing defects, right? So that's never going to be nice to read.
It's almost like you're meant to be like doom and gloom, like come round and find the problems.
Don't
tell me what's right with it, tell me what's wrong with it.
Yeah, so I always say, first of all, just bear that in mind. All survey reports are inherently negative.
Yeah.
And second of all, I always say, once you've absorbed the report, let's talk about it and go through it so that I can put it into context. For example, I might say, to you, that's a report with 79 defects in.
Yeah.
To me, right, that house was in great nick. That's fine. That's a normal house. These are normal issues. None of them are serious.
Yeah.
If it was me, I'd go ahead and buy it. I've got, and I'll always say that. I'll always be really honest.
Yeah.
There's nothing there that would put me off buying that property.
Yeah.
But you just need to wear these things. But those are normal things.
Yeah.
Right? That's different to if there's a major issue, that needs further investigation or very occasionally don't go near it.
Yeah. I would now consider a survey kind of like test driving a car. So you wouldn't just go to the car showroom. I like that. I'm not going to sit in it. I'm not going to drive it. I'll take your word for it. I'm just going to buy it.
Yeah.
Because the law in this country is buyer beware, isn't it? So it's up to you and your solicitor and your surveyor when you instruct one to get every piece of information you can before you commit to buying it. So treat it like you would a car. So don't feel too awkward about like moving sofas to look behind them and looking, can I look in the loft? Can I check the garage?
Yeah.
Those sort of things. Because if you're going to give this person a few £100,000, you want to know these things are right, don't you?
You do, and say, and say when you go on a viewing, say, is it okay if I just look in a few cupboards? Open the kitchen cupboards. Have they got lovely modern doors on sort of 30-year-old carcasses that are covered in mould and marks? Do they work or do they fall off when you open them? Check things like that. Don't be afraid to ask to.
I remember watching a TV show about like selling properties in America, but when they list it, they have to take a photo of the toilet flushing. It was like the most bizarre thing. Is we need to show these people that the water works. So there's like they press the button on the toilet and they'd like take a photo of the water spinning. I was like, there you go, the water works. So is it as British people, we don't want to put people out too much, do we? We don't want to make things awkward. So it's like, I'll take your word for it. I'll just have a look. Yeah, this is fine. But yeah, like do as much digging as you can when you're looking because you need to know these things, don't you? You
do. But again, you've got limited time, because you can't just do a viewing for 2 hours. You just, it's just not appropriate. You're gonna sort of, it's just odd and would cause offence. That's what the survey's for.
And I suppose the seller would probably get a bit agitated as well because there's no guarantee that you're going to buy the house and they've just committed 2 hours to showing you around for you to walk and
absolutely right.
Walk away.
Put the surveyor in that position. Surveying's a really odd job because I very rarely meet my client. Okay, so you go to a house to inspect a house, they're not your client, they own the property, so they don't want you there. So you're not welcome. And then it is the most invasive thing because we're looking in every cupboard, every wardrobe.
Do you get people following you around while you're doing it, seeing what you're up to?
I've somehow managed to avoid that so far. I once went to do a new build, I can't remember where it was actually, it was near Driffield, and one of the site guys just sort of stood next to me, and I think after about an hour and a half, I said, I'm going to be a while. He went, right, yeah, I've got that, yeah, I'll go. But I don't know if he thought I was going to be like sort of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think he just thought he'd stay with me until I'd finished, and then he soon realised that it was going to be a long day for him.
But then I've seen like the mortgage valuations we were talking about is they are 10 minutes.
Absolutely.
We remortgaged our house this year, and I worked from home that day, and I let the guy in. I was like, can I make you a cup of tea? He was like, don't worry, I won't be here long enough. And he was literally there with his clipboard, and he was like, I just need to go check. He didn't even check every room. He was like, how many rooms have you got? I was like, right, well, I need to check the main one and like one extra. I was like, okay, kitchen, bathroom. Oh, you've got like an outhouse above the garage. Yeah, cool, looked at that. And he said, oh, what do you do for a living? So I told him, and he's like, so I'm guessing you put the application in. I was like, well, I did, yeah. And he's like, what valuation did you ask for? So I told him, I was like, yeah, you're good. And then he just left. So I think I don't want to speak for him too much, but I think when it comes to the valuation is they look at the comparables before they come around.
Yeah.
And then they come around to see, is there anything untoward that doesn't fit these comparables? If it does, tick. If it doesn't, right, then I need to actually give a valuation. But we were a new build, like 2 years old, so he was like, yeah, that's fine, done. So, like you say, that's one of 8 jobs he had that day, and he just like flew through it.
Absolutely.
Whereas you're in the crawl space with a ladder.
To be fair, they get paid very little for those valuations.
Well, he did mention that actually, because we're seeing it more and more now with lenders where they're doing online valuations.
Yeah.
So we use a piece of software called Home Track, which a lot of the lenders use, which it is only run through data, so you do take it with a pinch of salt, because if you've put a big extension on the property or you've converted a loft, it doesn't take that into account. But we use that for a lot of like remortgages, and they will use the same. So if we're using the same, they'll just sign it off. It saves them time, it saves them money because they're not paying a surveyor. And then, the application goes through quicker. Purchases, obviously, they will come and have a look around. But even on purchases, they're trying to do them online as much as they can.
Yeah, I mean, there are, certainly as an estate agent, we had quite a few. It's certainly in my last couple of years, quite a lot of desktop valuations where they didn't even inspect and they use their automated valuation models for reaching figures. They look at see what they can find online.
You know, we get a call from the agent. It's like, oh, we've not had a call for access. It's like, we went to offer last week. And like, oh, that's good. And it's like, to be fair, it's
amazing
didn't know
news.
either. So.
As an estate agent, it's great news. Oh, wow, well, that's nice and easy and quick. But, you think, wow, they've not even been in the house.
Yeah.
So which just confirms it is purely about value and in no way about condition.
Yeah, which again puts a bit more emphasis on the need for getting your own survey.
Yeah, it does. But it doesn't matter whether you're buying with a mortgage or whether you're a cash buyer. I had somebody on the phone the other day. He said, well, I'm not really sure whether I need this because, I'm not getting a mortgage. I was like, well, what difference does that make? You're even more at risk.
Yeah.
Because it's all your money rather than a bit of yours and mostly your lenders.
Yeah.
It's all your money. If there's... I went to do a survey on a house in one of the Beverly Villages a few weeks ago, and it was a 1950s semi-detached house, cavity wall construction, generally fine, no major issues. And, going back to what you were saying earlier about the crawl spaces and the roof, generally it was fine, but I was sort of crawling through the roof and I was down in the eaves near the gable wall, and I just saw this thing about the size of my thumb sticking up above the top of the wall, just to the right of the chimney breast. And it was a little piece of white foam.
Right.
And seeing that, if I hadn't done that, I'd have missed it, which could have left me open to a lawsuit, in years to come. Because that little piece of white foam was actually urea formaldehyde insulation that had been injected probably in the 1970s into the walls.
Yeah.
And its use was soon discontinued because there were a lot of problems with it. As a cavity wall insulation method, it can often result in major damp issues. And as it happened, I don't think there were any issues with the walls because of it, but there will probably be one day. And it's extremely expensive to remove, and it's almost impossible to remove it properly, and it's often botched. So you could end up with a massive bill, in sort of 5, 10, 15 years' time. And that was just on a site of one little thing in the roof void.
Yeah.
So that house seemed fine, and otherwise it was fine. But because somebody had injected the walls with this stuff,
and you as a buyer aren't going to notice that because you're not going to be in the crawl space.
Absolutely.
You don't know what you're looking
not.
out for. And like I said, it's that small, a quick glance, you could easily miss that.
And nobody would ever know. It's back in the 70s, no documentation, nobody would ever know. But so that guy may have paid me, I don't know what it was, £800 for that survey. But we then got down a company to then do a quotation for removing that stuff. How much would it cost? If I have to remove it, what would it cost to remove it? And you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands.
Because do you give your opinion or a quote on what you think to fix the work would cost, or do you direct people to building professionals instead?
We used to in the past, surveyors, and some maybe still do, but we kind of moved away from that when I was working with Graham because especially sort of around post-COVID, costs changed so much, went up so much. It became harder and harder to estimate. So now, as a rule, I don't now give sort of cost estimates. I point people in the right direction so that it's the expert giving the costs rather than me. You sort of you have a rough idea of what it might cost, but you don't want to mislead people.
Well, that's it. It's like people, because we do buy-to-let mortgages, people ask us, well, shall I buy in my name or a limited company for tax reasons? And it's like, I can't give tax advice, so we direct people to an accountant.
Absolutely.
Same sort of thing. So we'll look to wrap this up. We've been chatting about surveys for almost 50 minutes now. We would have thought it, yeah. So just some quick fire questions. So we would always suggest getting a survey anyway, because then you've got full peace of mind anyway. But if you're looking at a property, what would be 3 things you would tell any buyer to check on the first viewing?
Okay, I think I'd want to see how old the electrics and boiler are, and you can normally get a good idea from having a look at the boiler and the fuse board, just to get a general idea for how old they are. I would look at the rainwater goods just to see if they're clean and look to be clear, or if they're stained. One of the most common defects I come across is, and this is a word of advice to any homeowner out there, not just a buyer, is people having paving or decking laid against the walls of the house.
Yeah.
And, so we all, houses have a damp-proof course. In modern houses, it's sort of 2 bricks above the ground. In older houses, it might be 1 brick or less. It's really important that you don't increase the height of the outside ground level next to the walls. And it's the most common thing I come across, and it causes rising and penetrating damp that then has to be sorted, and you have to rip out the paving and rip out the decking. And people get in builders or ground workers to do this work, and they just shove it in. But it's the most common problem. So when you're looking at a house, just have a look and see, how have the outside ground levels adjacent to the walls been increased? Because if they have, chances are you're going to have to remove them.
So when you do your report, if you find that there's been like an extension added to it, or a loft conversion, something like that, I'm guessing you would then highlight you would need to find the appropriate certification and regulations for those as well. Does that go in the report as well?
Yes, I do. So I will list the documents I would like to be available.
Yeah.
Loft conversions is a classic one, as you probably know. Most loft conversions don't have any certification because, end of the day, if you own a house and you want to convert your loft, you've got to pay a builder. The last thing you want to do is pay an architect and an inspector from building control to come along because it costs more money. Doesn't mean your builders are going to do a bad job, but end of the day, you might be putting your child up there in a bed. But yeah, obviously, if it hasn't got certification, we can't say that conversion was carried out structurally in accordance with the building regulations.
Yeah, because what we see on the lending side is people do the loft conversion, they put one of the kids up there, that they use it as a bedroom.
Yeah.
But if it's not done to regulations, the lenders can't consider it a bedroom.
No, it's just a loft space. It's a boarded loft space.
It's an extra room to use, yeah. So sometimes that skews valuations because they'll list it as a 4-bedroom house when it's 3 beds and a loft. So then if it doesn't have a certification, the lender values it. They value it as a 3-bed because you can't use the loft. No. And that brings the value down. So yeah, we've asked obviously what 3 things a buyer should ask. Is there anything that you would ask the estate agent kind of like along those similar lines?
So the estate agent, I would say, I would ask them, when was the property built? That doesn't seem to sort of come up in a lot of estate agency details, and I've never understood that. I would always put that in if I had it, if I could find it out. Also, what the method of construction is, and the estate agent should know that and should be able to establish it. Is it solid wall construction? Is it cavity wall construction? It might even be timber frame construction, or it might be a more unusual and non-standard form of construction, but the estate agent should know that, and I would want to know that. And have any what alterations have been carried out by the current owners.
I know, again, when we sold our house, when we bought it, there was an extension on the back, single-storey extension. When we then sold it, they were asking us for the fencer certificates for the windows and everything like that. Thankfully, we managed to find them. I can't remember where we found them, but it wasn't the first place we looked. So yeah, you want to be asking for all those sort of things, I guess.
You do, absolutely right. And that's another tip for buyers and homeowners about windows. Because, the number of people who get their mate John to come down and do a govey and replace the windows, but you don't want to do that. Yes, you might save some money, but without those certificates, buyer solicitors want those certificates, and it's important. And and I'll tell you why. I was doing a survey on a house last week, replacement window put in, lovely smart window, really nice, but it was probably a govey, okay. And since April 2002, when you replace a window or a door that doesn't have a structural support above it, like an old, like an archway or a solid stone or concrete lintel, when you replace them, in other words, when you take out old timber windows and put in PVC, you need to install a lintel, a metal lintel above that new window to support the brickwork above it.
Yeah.
And this house that I was at the other day, brand new window, but they hadn't put a lintel in. So the top of the window was bent and the brickwork above the window had collapsed, so with big cracks and openings. It's not the end of the world, but it needs fixing.
I can't believe it didn't like shatter the glass in the window under the pressure.
Well, it's kind of a gradual process. But yeah, just slight bowing. I know, it's interesting. There must be some room or flexibility.
Yeah.
But it's, I've seen it quite a lot. And so the buyer of that, if my client goes ahead and buys it, they're going to have to get a builder in to remove all the brickwork, install a lintel, put new brickwork, so it's not a small job. And they won't have vendor certification because that was not installed in compliance with the building regulations.
Yeah.
So things like that. So that's the problem with govies. Certification sometimes is really important.
Yeah, because people just don't think ahead. It's like, I'm going to live here forever. And it's like,
Absolutely.
I'm happy with it. It does the job. But then you don't know, circumstances change and then you're kind of stuck. And what we found is very few people will do a retrospective warranty or a retrospective kind of like insurance policy to cover it because they didn't see the work done in the first place. So they don't want to put their name to it when they don't know what steps were taken.
Absolutely. Why would they?
Yeah.
Why would they?
So my final question, we mentioned about the rat in the water tank. What would you say is probably the worst thing you've ever seen on a survey, putting you on the spot? That's got to be up there, surely.
Yeah, I certainly. I'm always fascinated, and I often put posts on my. When I say often, I mean I'm not very good at doing regular social media, but I try and do it periodically. But fascinating with sort of rodents, rats, mice, birds, insects. At this big house I was in North Lincolnshire the other day, 4 massive wasp nests in the roof. I mean, we're talking, we're talking huge wasp nests, but the most beautiful structures. But it always just makes you shiver slightly when you see them and you think, wow, is it occupied?
Yeah.
But normally you'd know. Normally, and also this time of the year, it's too cold. They've used it as a house and they've gone, and it's kind of won't be used again.
So what do you do in that situation, like in the summer then? So they're active, there's wasps in there. Do you still crawl in, do what you need to do?
Well, I'll get in the loft and, if, for example, if there's any sign of any bats, and sort of bat poo's a little bit different to rodent poo.
Yeah.
So if there's any evidence of bats, then you just get out because you're disturbing they're protected, you're disturbing it.
Yeah.
If there's wasps or bees, I'll just sort of put my head up and just get, because I put my head up a couple of months ago, and the nest was right in front. I literally lifted the lid, went up, and the nest was sort of that far from my nose. And I was like, okay. So I just crept back down quietly, sort of took a breath, and I thought, right, we'll just go up again, but slightly further back, and then anyway, it was empty and it was done. But so if there are insects in the loft, I'll just assess it. If I think it seems unsafe, then I won't go in.
Yeah.
But I always think it's important for surveyors to go to any lengths they can to inspect every part of the property. And I don't like it when I hear about surveyors saying, well, the access to the loft hatch was a bit tricky, so I didn't bother.
Yeah.
I think, well, that's just completely defeat the object of that survey. It's no good you saying to the report, sorry, I couldn't do the loft.
Yeah.
Obviously, if there's no hatch, you can't get in.
Yeah.
But you need to sort of, so I'm not saying go and be stung by 1,000 wasps.
Yeah.
But, if there's a couple of wasps, that's fine.
Yeah.
Comes
with the job.
It comes with the job. Just as, temperature, in the winter, chilblains and standing in the cold for 3 hours outside, it's just part of the job.
Yeah. It sounds very glamorous.
Oh, yes, it's a very glamorous job.
Fighting off wasps. I found this really, really interesting and really useful because, like I said, we have a lot of kind of younger buyers, whether it be first-timers or those going from property 1 to 2, and it's one of the most common questions we get is, well, shall I do this?
Yeah.
And absolutely. Just have that peace of mind. Just hearing what you're saying, the level of detail you go to is nothing I would be able to do on a viewing, nor would I want to. No. You're the trained professional. You can tell me everything that I need to know before I commit. So for those that want to instruct you for their surveys, how do we get hold of you? Where's the best place to find you?
So I'm available on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's normally OH Surveying or Oliver Hudson Surveying. You can find me on most of those things. What I would say is if you're buying a property Some people seem to wait to order their survey, and I get that. They may be waiting to see if they get the valuation, if the valuation is okay, or maybe in for a mortgage offer. But, there aren't really enough surveyors, and there's generally a waiting list for surveys. I mean, I've already got 3 booked in January, so get it booked in quickly. Yeah. Because there is a bit of a waiting list, and I hate having to turn people away and recommend others, but I often have to. So, so I'm available on most social media platforms.
And I think as well with what could come back on the survey, where you might need to have that chat with the agent, with the seller, possibly renegotiate if it's something drastic, is the sooner you can do that, rather than at the 11th hour, it makes the process so much smoother.
It does. I was doing a survey a couple of weeks ago, and the seller was really angry, which he sort of passed on to me, which was nice, because obviously I have nothing to do with the client or the buying process, but because he said the mortgage valuation was weeks and weeks and weeks ago. We were sort of hoping to be near exchange and completion, and suddenly I get a phone call saying there's a guy came around to do a survey. Yeah. So he said, I don't know why you're here, and because we're about to exchange. And I said, well, maybe they got some last minute advice to get a survey. I don't know, but it really does annoy sellers. So you kind of do have to sort of get on with it early.
Yeah. We had a client where he's buying a HMO, out of town investor, buying one in Hull. We got him the mortgage offer. 7 weeks later, after getting the offer, he then gets a survey, highlights an issue, renegotiated to get £10,000 off. That mortgage was then no longer applicable because it didn't meet the minimum criteria, had to move it somewhere else, and he's ringing our team every day saying, why is this taking so long? The seller's getting angry with me. So I had to be fairly direct with him and say, look, we're not the problem here. We lost 7 weeks because that's how long it took you. That's why your seller's angry, not because we've had to resubmit a new application. That's a rant for another day.
No, but that's it. That is exactly it. Don't wait to book your survey. A, as you said, because so you can rectify any issues that come up, and B, it really upsets sellers, and there's chains involved. It can cause a lot of problems.
Well, it's the time, money and effort that they've invested, because likely they're moving on to something new as well, so then they're upsetting someone above them. So absolutely get it done early, iron everything out, and you've got time to fix things.
Well, that's right, and if you're not sure if you're going to buy it, well, then you shouldn't have, if you've had an offer accepted and you've instructed solicitors and you're committed, then get on with the survey, because it might take a while to get a surveyor available, and as we've said, to remedy any issues that come up.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for today. I've really enjoyed it.
No, thanks for having me.
This is going to be edited and go out in due course. So thank you very much. I don't even know what episode this is. We've done that many of them now. But tune in a few more weeks. We have one of our lovely clients, Natalie, who's joining us. She's gone from a portfolio of 2 properties up to 15 in less than a year. So she's doing some really interesting things. So tune in for that one. Thank you very much, Oliver, for joining us.
Thanks, James.
We'll see you again soon. Thank you.